Hello, I'm Judy Woodruff. As the U.S. economy struggles to recover, the White House is looking for ways to create jobs and spur growth. Austan Goolsbee, as the new chairman of the President's Council of Economic Advisers, is central to that mission. Goolsbee has been advising President Obama since he first ran for the Senate in 2004. I sat down with Austan Goolsbee at the White House. We talked about the economy, jobs, the White House economic team, and tax cuts. Austan Goolsbee, thank you very much for talking with us.
Thanks for having me, Judy.
You are an eminent economist. There is one other eminent economist, Alan Greenspan, who is so worried about the fiscal crisis in this country, the debt crisis, that he believes no tax cuts should be extended. A third eminent economist, Paul Krugman, says unless the economy is stimulated, this country's in for a decade of slow growth like Japan in the 1990s. Which view is closer to yours?
Well, that's kind of conflating the longer run and the short run, which is always dangerous, and it's particularly dangerous right now. I think in the short run, everybody knows we've got to get the economy growing faster. We have positive but moderate growth, but we've got to get more job creation and more growth out of the economy. The president identified early, and it's in some sense contradictory to the Krugman view that you're describing, that the primary way that we've got to get sustainable job growth is going to come from standing up the private sector.
Let me ask you about the growth picture coming up. The growth forecasts that have been coming out project that for the rest of this year, next year, even into 2012, that it's looking down. There's just this new pessimism that seems to have built up over the last few weeks. Do you share these forecasts?
Well, be careful. When you say looking down, nobody is forecasting that the economy is going to be shrinking or that we're going into double dip. That's very rare. What we've been picking up in the forecast is in our official forecast is that what started out the first 3 months of this year looked like it was really going to start coming in robustly. Most of the data was coming in better than expected. You hit a headwind from the financial crisis in Europe, which pulls that down a little bit, and we face a tough spot, and we face a background tough spot that coming out of financial crisis-driven recessions are always hard to get out of. But we've had moderate positive growth, and most people expect that to continue and then speeding up into next year. I'm not in the doom and gloom camp, but we should be realistic. That obviously the unemployment rate's 9.6%, and it takes a lot of time and a lot of effort to get that down. And we primarily got to count on the private sector doing that.
You mentioned unemployment. The best or the latest mainstream economic forecasts, as you very well know, show unemployment not really getting much above or below 8%, if not 9%, into 2012. If that's the case, that would be a political nightmare for this president. But what can you do about employment?
Well, look, I'm just the policy guy. I'm not a political expert. The main thing you do to get the unemployment rate down is getting job creation up from the economy growing faster, partly driven by targeted incentives coming from government. But really, what we're trying to do is unleash the private sector. And let's do that in a way that's bipartisan, that we have common ground. The president outlined a number of investment incentives that the business community has called for some time, and we ought to be able to do that. I think that the recession we're in, it's not just the deepest recession since 1929. The right way to picture that is, by some measures, it is deeper than all three of the last recessions combined. And so when you're that far down, everybody knows it's going to take a long-term plan and a lot of hard work on private sector, on government's part, education and training. All of those things have got to be there to slowly work our way out of this. We need to keep doing more. And as we do that, the unemployment rate will eventually be coming down. We will be generating jobs. That's all we can do.
About housing, can there be a robust turnaround unless the housing sector picks up significantly?
Well, I think I would say two things about that. One is housing has not, in the past 2 to 3 months, has not been as bad as some of the biggest doubters were predicting. So you have seen, even in some of the recent data, prices appear perhaps to have stabilized or even in some cases gone up a small amount. So I think you're seeing some less negative news in that sector. The second is from a previous business cycle that was primarily driven by consumption growing faster than income and residential construction. I think it's a mistake to say we can't have a recovery unless we go back to unsustainable consumption growth and a housing bubble-driven recovery. I don't think that's true. I think the president's vision is business investment, exports, and sustainable consumption growth ought to be the things driving it. So housing is critically important. We ought to keep working in that area. We've done a lot of different things. But I do not anticipate that dragging us back into double-dip recession at all.
When we come back, the climate of business investment. Let's talk about the private sector. U.S. companies right now have about $1.8 trillion in cash on their balance sheets. A lot of that, we're told, was earned overseas. It's being held overseas so that these money isn't subject to U.S. tax. Why not, as labor leader Andy Stern has suggested, and some business leaders, give these companies a tax break if they bring that money home and spend it in the United States?
I'd say on that, as many other policies, we are open to looking through the details of all sorts of targeted policies to encourage investment and job creation in this country. The president's determination was that the best way to do that were the three policies that he just outlined, that we do infrastructure investment in this country the way they have been doing in China and many other nations we are competing with, to encourage businesses to locate here and make it easier, to have direct tax incentives for investing in this country, and to make the R&D tax credit permanent, to encourage research investment in this country. Right. All of those are, in the past, when there's money overseas, they may bring back the money if they see the demand is there and the incentives are there. The number one most important thing is business has got to see that this is going to be a sustained positive growth recovery. And then I think a lot of that money is going to come off the sidelines. The international tax treatment of foreign profits of multinationals, we can look into the details of those policies. But the number one thing is let's get the demand there, so that business has some confidence that it makes sense to build factories and that they have some incentives to do so.
Let's talk about investment. One of the bright spots in the economy over the last year has been capital investment. Spending by companies on equipment, software grew something like 25% annualized rate in the second quarter. At the same time, unemployment is the Achilles heel. So the question is, why is the president proposing giving companies tax breaks for investment rather than for hiring?
Well, I would say two things about that. First, we passed the HIRE Act, which gave direct tax incentives for hiring, particularly of the long-term unemployed. And we did that. We have incentives for small businesses, encouraging small business to hire, giving them, he's cut taxes for small business now 16 times, and in the small business bill would give substantial incentives for banks to provide easier credit to small business. Those are things directly tied to job creation. And he continues to be open to those. But in addition to direct job measures, what the business community has frequently pointed out is that building factories, buying equipment, it goes hand in hand with hiring. Now, we've started the investment, and then we hope that that turns into the job creation. But I don't think you can just count on only hiring workers without also investing and giving them the tools that they need to do their jobs. And I think the president recognized that, and that's why he's trying to do both.
A China question. Congress may pass a bill that would allow companies to petition the U.S. government for higher duties on imports from China in order to compensate for the effect of China's weak currency. Is that a good idea?
Look, as you know, the Treasury and Secretary Geithner are the spokespeople about currency issues for the administration. So I don't want to weigh into something that's not my purview. I will say the president has said to the Chinese leadership when they came to visit that he thought they had not done enough on currency matters, and that we ought to be working together to get to a situation where the currency rates are more market determined and less decided by political figures, and that we want to move to get away from the big imbalances that we've faced. And I think he's totally right about that.
There are a number of Republican congressional candidates running around right now campaigning on reducing the deficit by returning all the TARP money and all the stimulus money. Do they have a point?
Let's take the Recovery Act. We have been on target. About 70% of the money has gone out. To cancel what's left would raise taxes on more than 100 million middle-class people in this country. That is the totally wrong thing to do. To cancel the tax cuts that the president put in place that are in the stimulus and still remain to go out, as they were designed to do, canceling that would be a terrible and very ignorant decision. Because when you are in a weak economy and you're starting to get out of a deep hole, what you need is some certainty, and that's why the president's been so strongly in favor of preserving the middle-class tax cuts of the preserving the middle-class Bush tax cuts, and reversing that in the stimulus makes no sense. Canceling the renewable energy, solar, or other tax credits, it doesn't make sense. I think it'd be a big mistake.
How will the new Obama economic team shape up after the break? Let's talk about the new economic team, senior economic team around the president. With the exception of the president, it is going to be new. Will there be any change philosophically?
Look, I think the philosophy comes from the president, and the philosophy says moderate growth is not enough. Our focus has got to be how do we get the hiring rate up? How do we get the growth rate of the economy up? That's going to be the philosophical basis of whatever the team is going to look like. Obviously, the decisions are the president's to make. He's got to have whatever team he's comfortable with. He usually has a taste for a diverse set of views, and I imagine he's going to continue to want to hear from lots of different types of people. But I think philosophically, it's not going to be a shift off of number one focus being jobs and growth.
A nomination of one of the members of the team, Jack Lew, to head up the Office of Management and Budget. Nomination being held up in the Senate. Is that affecting budget policy? Is it causing problems?
Well, you know, as you know, the main heart of the matter on the budget has not. The budget comes out, you know, into January, beginning of February, and a lot of the most intense discussions have not started up. But the president wants Jack Lew as head of the OMB.
Thanks to Jack's family.
He has done a great job in the past at that, and he will do a great job now. And there are a large number of appointments that are not confirmed in the Senate. They got to get confirmed. I mean, we need people to be addressing these problems, and I think that's where we are.
Tax cuts. Republicans are saying that rather than increase taxes on upper income taxpayers, which is what, and they are saying that's what it would mean if you raise taxes on those earning over $250,000, that it would hurt small businesses. That it's better to cut outlays, freeze discretionary spending, put it back at the 2008 level.
Okay, I'll say two things about that. The solution to our problems, I do not believe, is to let's go back to George Bush's budgets and take George Bush's philosophy. That did not work. That fundamentally failed. It sent us into the worst recession since 1929. If you look at the tax cuts, The president doesn't have to take a lecture in tax cutting from anybody. He cut taxes for hundreds of millions of people. In the Recovery Act, he's cut taxes for small business 16 times. He's calling for major tax relief and tax incentives for business to invest in this country, to invest in R&D, for companies to invest in renewable energy, a whole bunch of things which experts believe, and I think common sense would tell you, are what you need for job creation. What we cannot afford is a $700 billion tax cut for millionaires and billionaires that the evidence shows doesn't work. That doesn't work. It's the least beneficial thing to get the economy growing.
Question about the business community. There's a widespread impression out there, you talk to business people, that this president is anti-business. What can be done to change that impression?
Look, I think the first thing is you knew people, if you're starting in as deep a hole as we did, and in conditions where even with growth, the unemployment rate is still going to be high, you knew people were not going to be, people were going to be prone to be in a bad mood just because of what conditions are. I think that what we can do collectively with the business community, the president, Congress in a bipartisan way, is let's focus on where there's common ground to get the economy growing again. I think everybody is on that same page. And I think a number of policies that the president is strongly in favor of, if we sit down and look at it, I think the business community and the wider community is going to say, yes, they agree with that. Whether it's investing in education, the small business credit and job tax policies, the infrastructure, the investment incentives, I think you are likely to see some change in that sentiment.
Up next, Paul Volcker's role in the administration. A few questions to wrap up. Paul Volcker, former Federal Reserve Chairman, you've gotten close to him. A view out there that he hasn't been fully utilized by this administration. What do you think?
The guy's my hero. I love him. He's been a great influence on the administration. From everything I've seen, whatever he has to say, the administration is interested. The Economic Recovery Advisory Board, which he has been the chair of, is coming on its 2-year mark at the turn of the year. And I think if you look at it, it's been very influential. He was very influential in the financial regulatory reform discussion. A number of other ideas came out of that. They were early, big proponents of an infrastructure bank to try to address the economic infrastructure in the country, of Homestar, a program to try to get construction workers back to work, retrofitting homes. You will see coming up at their next meeting next week, a lot of discussion about how the private sector can work in partnership with community colleges, with the government to try to improve the training of workers. So I think he's been influential, and whatever influence or opinions he has, we want to hear them.
Speaking of philosophy, there is a perception out there that in the past, administration officials, Bush and earlier, were on the Republican side would appear and consult with economic experts on the left. There's a sense, I'm reading and hearing, that economic experts, policymakers in this administration are less willing to go out and talk to economists on the right. So my question is, are there Republican economists you talk to, or?
Oh yeah, I don't think that's true. That is true at all. If you take in the microcosm the Volcker's Economic Recovery Advisory Board, they're outside people. They're bipartisan. You got Marty Feldstein on the board, and he writes op-eds, attacking the president frequently. I talk to Marty quite a lot. The president's told all of us, number one focus got to be job creation and economic growth. I think we talk to business people, economists of both parties, and a lot of experts are essentially not political. They're not partisan. We want ideas and advice from anywhere we can get it. I think it's totally unfair to say we're not talking to Republicans. That's not true at all. I personally talk to a very large number of Republicans.
Any names other than Feldstein?
Well, look, Marty Feldstein, Mark Zandi's a Republican, Ken Rogoff. There are a lot of people. We're reading their materials. We're trying to talk to them. Those are on the economist side. And then in business leaders, a lot of major business leaders are Republicans. Jeff Immelt, Jim Owens. There are a whole lot of people that we talk to on a regular basis.
Last question. Austan Goolsbee is considered one of the few people in Washington with a sense of humor. Is this something you're going to be able to deploy in your new position, do you think?
If you ask him, most of my sense of humor is laughing at myself, and I think I'll get a lot of opportunities to do that in my new job.
Self-deprecating always works. Austan Goolsbee, thank you very much for talking with us. We appreciate it. And that's our conversation with Austan Goolsbee, chairman of the President's Council of Economic Advisors. I'm Judy Woodruff. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.